On the surface, it was pure candy-colored fantasy. A lonely astronaut, a gorgeous genie in a bottle, and a blink of magic that could fix anything. But behind that pink chiffon and purple smoke were secrets no one saw. A lead actress hiding a real-life pregnancy under veils and camera angles, a troubled star dosing himself with champagne just to get through the day, network bosses killing the love story with one bad decision, and lives forever shaped by compromises made off-screen. For decades, we thought I Dream of Jeannie was just sweet escapism. But the truth behind the bottle is stranger, darker, and far more human than anyone imagined. Stay with me, because the 15 hidden facts you're about to discover will change the way you see Jeannie and Tony forever. And if you enjoy deep dives like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you never miss the next episode. Part 1. The role she almost turned down. Good news that felt like a burden. Barbara Eden found out she was pregnant right after landing the role of Jeannie and almost asked to withdraw from the show. In Sidney Sheldon's quiet office, Barbara Eden sat across from the man who had chosen her to become a 2,000-year-old mythical genie. She had just received the news she and her husband had been waiting on for 7 years. She was pregnant. Private joy instantly turned into career anxiety, her mind filled with images of that midriff-bearing costume, all the jumping, spinning, bending over. Everything seemed to clash with being an expectant mother. Eden has said she walked into that meeting fully intending to step down and gently suggest the producers find another genie. Instead of firing her, Sheldon went silent for a moment and then said, "Let me see what I can do." It was one of those rare moments when a pregnant actress wasn't immediately replaced, but that kindness came with a different cost. From then on, everyone on set had to learn how to hide her pregnancy with veils, camera angles, and costume tweaks, as if her pregnancy was something to be covered up, even though it was the emotional center of Eden's life at that time. Part 2. Black and White and the Color of Financial Fear. Saving money for a fragile miracle. The first season of I Dream of Jeannie was shot in black and white not just because of technology, but because the producers were too nervous to go all in with a pregnant star. Many viewers assume Season 1 was black and white simply because color TV wasn't yet standard. Eden remembered a more practical reason. The network was afraid to spend the extra money on color for a series whose lead actress was pregnant. No one knew if she would physically manage to last the full season. So Jeannie launched in black and white, like a cautious test run. From Jeannie's perspective inside the bottle, the color of the world was muted, but her inner life felt anything but full of suspense, waiting for her new master to choose her, waiting for the outside world to decide her fate. Behind the scenes, Eden walked onto the soundstage in costumes given extra veils, extra draping, extra details to disguise her growing belly. The habit of covering up set in fast, covering the true color of the bottle, covering the glow of a pregnant woman, and covering the fear that one bout of morning sickness or a complication could be enough to get her replaced. The black and white look of the early season wasn't just a technical limitation. It was the color of a trust the studio wasn't ready to fully give. Part 3. Champagne and a man always adjusting himself. Dosing himself to survive the pressure. Larry Hagman regularly drank, even experimented with LSD, and brought his wildly shifting moods with him to the set. On screen, Major Tony Nelson is a model astronaut, disciplined, orderly, always trying to keep control in a chaotic, magical world. Off-camera, Larry Hagman was the one who kept shattering his own inner order. He recalled drinking champagne throughout shooting days, sipping all day for 12 hours, to stay in a half-lit state, not fully sober, not truly drunk. In memoirs and cast interviews, colleagues describe his moods as unpredictable, cheerful one day, furious the next, withdrawn and distant the day after. The entire crew lived under the emotional weather he created. It was a repeating pattern. When he couldn't stand the pressure, the scripts he disliked, the limitations of family-hour television, he took it out on his body with alcohol and drugs, then carried that glossy exhaustion in front of the camera. Tony Nelson tries to control Jeannie with commands. Larry Hagman tried to control himself with chemicals that slowly began to control him instead. Part 4. The Jim Beam Bottle turned fairy tale prison. Hard liquor turned into a dream house. Jeannie's bottle was really a repainted Jim Beam decanter, both a beautiful prop and a symbol of captivity. In collective memory, Jeannie's bottle is a quirky little palace, plush cushions, draped curtains, a spiral staircase. But it started life as something ordinary. A 1964 Jim Beam Christmas bourbon decanter, redesigned, repainted, and gilded to look like an ancient artifact. In the black and white season, it was a smoky green. Only later did it put on the vivid purple we all remember. From Jeannie's point of view, the bottle is both home and prison. Every time she's ordered, "Get back in your bottle," she folds herself into that ornate but confined space. Behind the scenes, the fact that a liquor bottle became the home of a female character carries a loaded metaphor. Outside, Tony leans on alcohol to cope. Inside, Jeannie lives in a bottle that has been prettied up to hide what it really is, a container. The recurring presence of alcohol, in the prop, in the star's habits, blurs the line between light-hearted magic and the more troubling ways people escape their lives. Part 5. The policed belly button and off-screen hysteria. A small question that killed a bit of freedom. Censors weren't obsessed with Jeannie's navel at first, until the press turned it into a moral battlefield and rules suddenly tightened. Barbara Eden has said that early on, no one on set was overly fixated on her bra-top costume. Her navel wasn't treated as some forbidden territory. Everything changed when a reporter jokingly asked a censor whether Jeannie would be allowed to show her belly button. That offhand question set off debate, and suddenly her navel became a moral symbol. From then on, every costume was carefully cut, so the fabric line always crossed exactly where the censors insisted. Inside the character, Jeannie is a 2,000-year-old being who is completely at peace with her body and power. Inside Barbara, each day on set was a reminder that a few extra centimeters of skin could trigger a cultural storm. The earlier habit of concealing her body, born from hiding her pregnancy, morphed into a new form. Cover more. Pull the fabric a little higher. Don't upset the invisible guardians of decency. Just as Tony is forever telling Jeannie, "Don't use your magic," television at the time kept telling women like Eden, "Don't be too real, too free, too visibly yourself." Part 6. The Real Lion and the Man Who Panicked. Jeannie calmer than the lion. Barbara Eden enjoyed working with a real lion on set, while Larry Hagman's fear was written all over his body. In a handful of episodes, Jeannie appears alongside a real lion brought onto the soundstage. For most people, this sounds insane. Eden liked the animal more than many of the men. She approached, stroked its thick mane, and spoke softly to it as if comforting a child. Hagman stood at a distance, stiff, eyes locked on every movement of those claws. In that moment, the power dynamic of the show flipped. The brave astronaut couldn't hide his fear while the mythical female creature remained unshaken. Eden had to coach her co-star. Stand very still, angle your body, and stroke it gently. Once again, the woman, both Jeannie and Barbara, carried the burden of calming everyone else's anxiety. That soothing behavior repeats. She calms Tony's anger at her magic, calms Larry's eruptions over the script, and now calms an actual lion on set. Part 7. A Love Story Kept at Arm's Length by Morality Codes. The bottle could never enter the bedroom. Network standards forbade Jeannie's bottle from appearing in Tony's bedroom, forcing the couple to stay emotionally close but physically distant. Looking back, Eden has described a peculiar rule. Jeannie's bottle was never allowed to be seen inside Tony Nelson's bedroom. No one needed to pin it on a memo. Everyone understood it would be considered too intimate for family television. The relationship between a lonely astronaut and a supernatural woman was thus locked into a perpetual in-between. They loved each other, took care of each other, but the bottle stayed outside the door. From Jeannie's point of view, it was like an invisible spell. She could cook, clean, fix every disaster in Tony's life. But she could not truly cross the line into physical intimacy. Eden has said Jeannie believes she is human. Only Tony consistently insists that she is something else. That gap between person and being shows up in every near-romantic scene. Gazes cut off at just the right moment. Hands never resting for too long. The bottle never gliding into a bedroom shot. What could have been a full-bodied love story was turned into a choreography of nearly touching, carefully designed not to trip the moral alarms of the time. Part 8. A Paper Marriage and a Ratings Free Fall. The wedding that killed the magic. Marrying Tony and Jeannie in the final season killed the romantic tension. Ratings dropped, and even Barbara Eden quietly opposed the decision. For years, the show's charm hinged on the not quite yet between its leads. Jeannie constantly trying to get closer. Tony constantly keeping his distance. Audiences waiting for the moment the line might be crossed. When NBC pressured the producers to marry the two in Season 5, Sidney Sheldon and Barbara Eden both felt something was wrong. Eden later called the decision ridiculous, but she didn't fight it to the bitter end. Once again, she yielded to those with more power. From the instant Jeannie walked down the aisle, the underlying engine of the story, will they or won't they, vanished. Critics and many people connected with the show believe the wedding did real damage to the series' appeal, driving ratings down and bringing Tony and Jeannie's story to an end a year later. The familiar pattern resurfaced. Executives far away made a permanent choice for a female character, ignoring the instincts of the woman playing her. On screen, Jeannie submits to her master's rules. Off-screen, Barbara submits to network realities, both losing a piece of the freedom they knew they deserved. Part 9. Larry Hagman, the brilliant, troubled kid. A volatile temperament that ruled the set. Co-stars described Larry Hagman as a talented but difficult child, full of charm one day and storms the next, forcing everyone to guess which version of him they'd get. Barbara Eden and Bill Daly never denied Hagman's brilliance. His quick mind, razor timing, and instinct for comedy. But that talent came tied to dark days, when he arrived on set with a stony stare, smelling of alcohol, with a list of complaints about the script. Sometimes he would argue furiously with writers because he hated a line. Other times he would act like a mischievous boy, causing trouble just to draw attention. For the crew, it was a form of emotional turbulence. Everyone had to quietly read Hagman's face in the morning to know whether that day's shoot would go smoothly. The habit of using his mood to control the room repeated over and over, much like Tony in the story trying to control Jeannie's behavior whenever he felt insecure. And just like Jeannie, the people around Hagman, Eden, the lighting techs, the stagehands, often chose to swallow their frustration and move on, because they understood how much the show depended on his star power. Part 10. Letters, contests, and a fan base that refused to be ignored. Cold numbers didn't tell the whole story. While Nielsen ratings were only modest, the flood of mail for in-show contests proved viewers' love for Jeannie was far more intense than the charts suggested. At one point, NBC was on the fence about renewing I Dream of Jeannie because its rating, around 18.2, sat right on the maybe keep it, maybe cancel it line. Meanwhile, Sidney Sheldon ran a story in which Jeannie was locked in a NASA safe for 4 weeks, asking viewers to send in guesses about the combination. The response nearly buried the post office. Tens of thousands of letters poured into the studio each week, far outstripping what the ratings alone would have predicted. From Jeannie's inner perspective, it was one of the rare times she could feel her power extending beyond the executive's control. Thousands of real people genuinely wanted to rescue her from that safe. Yet the big decisions still leaned more on the cold columns of Nielsen data than on the piles of envelopes. The pattern of listening to numbers and ignoring human voices ran through much of American TV, and Jeannie was an early example. Never a mega hit, but beloved enough that real people took the time to write, imagine, and care. Part 11. When Private Joy Gets Stained by Later Tragedy. Motherhood and loss, entangled in one memory. Barbara Eden was pregnant during the show's first season, but decades later had to face the death of her only son from a drug overdose. In those early episodes, the young woman in pink chiffon hides a secret under every layer of fabric, a baby growing beneath the waistband. The mix of fatigue, anticipation, and happiness lent her eyes a depth that's hard to pin down, as if Jeannie wasn't just in love with Tony, but was also carrying a much bigger secret. Eden gave birth to her son Matthew in August 1965, right as the show began to find its footing. Years later, long after Jeannie had turned into a golden memory, Eden's son died from a heroin overdose at 35. From that point on, each time she looked back at those images of herself in the old costume, she no longer saw just a rising young star. She saw a young mother at the peak of hope, unaware of the grief, waiting decades ahead. The habit of hiding real feelings behind an on-camera smile repeated itself. Earlier, it was pregnancy. Later, it was mourning. Jeannie always smiles from inside the bottle. Barbara learned to let her sorrow stay outside the frame whenever she stepped back into the public eye. Part 12. Reunions without the man who defined the love story. Jeannie returns, but Tony becomes someone, or something, else. The 1985 and 1991 reunion movies proceeded without Larry Hagman, forcing Jeannie to revisit the past, missing her most important partner. When I Dream of Jeannie, 15 years later, aired in 1985, viewers expected to see Tony, Larry Hagman, at Jeannie's side again. Instead, Wayne Rogers played Tony because Hagman was busy ruling nighttime TV on Dallas. The second film, I Still Dream of Jeannie, in 1991, also lacked him. Tony Nelson was mentioned by name and glimpsed in animated form in the opening, but never appeared as a flesh-and-blood character. From Jeannie's perspective, it was like stepping back into a dream with a hole torn in the middle. She wore the same costume, folded her arms the same way, blinked the same blink. But the man who had shared her original comic rhythm was gone. Eden admitted those years felt both moving and disorienting, as if she were dragged back into her own memories while some of the key people in them had vanished. Once again, we see the pattern. Networks tried to rekindle old magic while leaving out the very source of much of that magic. Part 13. Endless comparisons, with Bewitched and a life between two icons. Always standing next to another witch, I Dream of Jeannie was constantly compared to Bewitched, and Barbara Eden had to carve out her identity between two powerful female icons, one witch, one Jeannie. From the beginning, Jeannie was marketed as NBC's answer to ABC's Bewitched. Two supernaturally gifted women, two mortal men, two seemingly peaceful suburbs. Eden has often rejected the idea that she and Elizabeth Montgomery were rivals. She recalled that they occasionally met in makeup rooms, exchanged polite greetings, and laughed about the fact that both of them were pregnant in the early days of their sitcom careers. Still, from Jeannie's vantage point, being constantly compared to Samantha feels like living between two worlds. On one side, the more layered, emotionally complex witch. On the other, the lighter, more bubbly Jeannie. The habit of judging women by setting them against each other rather than examining their stories on their own showed up again and again in the press. Eden, like her character, had to get used to being the other one in critics' comparisons, even though, for millions of fans, hers was the face of childhood daydreams. Part 14. A just okay hit that refused to die. Never a mega hit, never gone. I Dream of Jeannie never dominated the ratings, yet it survived for decades in reruns and even beat new network shows in its afterlife. Across 5 seasons, Jeannie only cracked the top 30 once and landed at number 26. By the final season, it had fallen out of the charts entirely. Yet once it moved into local syndication after 1970, something surprising happened. The show's reruns began outrating brand new programming on all 3 major networks airing at the same time. For Tony and Jeannie, within the story, that's like a flight aborted halfway that somehow keeps carrying more and more passengers in imagination alone. The series was never hot enough to dominate prime time, but it was perfect for after-school viewing, late-night cable, lazy weekend afternoons. The industry's habit of dismissing anything not immediately explosive clashed with the way audiences embraced warm, gentle shows like Jeannie. That quiet staying power is why, decades later, every time Eden puts on the pink costume again, the applause still feels as if no time has passed at all. Part 15. The legacy of a blink, light but full of cracks. Magic that covered very human wounds. Beneath the laughter and purple mist lie a hidden pregnancy, addiction, network overreach, and lives built on constant compromise. Today, people remember I Dream of Jeannie as candy-coated fantasy. A lonely man frees a dazzling Jeannie, and his life becomes a series of bright, funny mishaps. Pull back the pastel curtain, though, and you see a pregnant woman afraid of losing her job, learning to hide her body. A man numbing himself with alcohol and drugs to endure a show he didn't always love. A cast riding out sudden mood storms and creative choices twisted by ratings, anxiety. Inside Jeannie, every blink is a small contradiction, an assertion of power that simultaneously bends to her master's will, an act of rescue that also makes her guilty of being different. Inside Barbara, each smile, with arms folded, is another choice to keep playing the sweet, pliant woman, even after she has lived through grief and growth far beyond the bounds of the bottle. The legacy of I Dream of Jeannie isn't just its catchy opening tune or that iconic purple Jim Beam decanter, it's a deeply human feeling. In a world painted over with magic, everyone is quietly negotiating with their own wounds, over and over, just to keep the story flying. The story flying.